I was 74 when my world cracked open. My name's Ruth Bennett, and for 50 years I'd been a piano teacher in our small town, filling my cozy two-story home with the sound of scales, sonatas, and the laughter of kids learning to play. My house, with its wraparound porch and ivy climbing the walls, was my haven, paid off through years of lessons and careful saving with my late husband, Henry. He'd been gone 10 years, taken by a sudden stroke, but his memory lived in the upright piano in my living room, its keys worn smooth from my fingers, and his gentle encouragement. I'd raised our son David in this house, teaching him Twinkle Twinkle on that same piano, cheering at his recitals, sacrificing to send him to college. I thought we were close, thought he carried the values I'd poured into him: respect, hard work, family. My 74th birthday should have been a quiet joy. I didn't need much. A card, a call, a visit from David and his fiancée, Emily. I'd baked a lemon cake, my favorite, its tangy scent filling the kitchen. I set out a single candle, a tradition Henry started, saying one wish was enough. When you had each other. I'd called David a week earlier, reminding him, and he'd promised to stop by with Emily. They lived just 20 minutes away, in a glossy condo they were always upgrading with new furniture, new gadgets. I spent the morning tidying, dusting the piano, setting out teacups for company. I wore my best cardigan, the blue one Henry loved, and waited on the porch, watching the oak trees sway in the spring breeze. The hours ticked by, no call, no text, no car pulling into the driveway. By dusk, the cake sat untouched, the candle unlit. I moved inside, the silence heavy, and checked my phone again. Nothing. I tried to brush it off. David was busy. Emily was planning their wedding. Life gets in the way, but the hurt settled deep, like a wrong note in a melody. David had grown distant since meeting Emily, her sharp smile and love for designer bags, replacing his warmth with talk of wedding venues and honeymoons. Forgetting my birthday wasn't just carelessness, it was a sign I'd become invisible to them, a footnote in their shiny lives. That evening, I checked my voicemail, hoping for a late message, an apology. Instead I found a missed call from First Community Trust, my bank. The message was from Linda, the manager, a former student who'd taken piano lessons from me as a teen. Her voice was urgent. "Ruth, we need to talk. There's a $50,000 loan in your name, tied to David and Emily's address. Call me." My heart sank, my fingers tightening around the phone. I called Linda back, my voice calm despite the tremor in my chest. "Tell me everything." She explained. David and Emily had used my social security number and forged my signature to secure the loan, claiming it was for their wedding, a lavish affair with a country club venue, gourmet catering, and a Bahamas honeymoon. They'd used my pristine credit, built over decades of careful living, to fund their extravagance. I stood in my living room, staring at the piano, its keys glinting in the lamplight. The betrayal hit harder than the forgotten birthday. David, who I'd taught to play fair, to respect what we'd built, had gone behind my back. Emily, who'd called me mom with a smile, had signed my name like it was hers to take. They hadn't just forgotten me, they'd used me, risking my home, my savings, my life for their selfish dreams. I thought of the house, every corner holding a memory. Henry tuning the piano, David practicing scales, the porch where we'd watched fireflies. I'd paid it off with my lessons, kept it alive through grief. Now they thought they could cash it in. I sat down, the unlit candle staring back at me. The heartbreak was raw, but something else stirred, a quiet, stubborn defiance. I wasn't the frail widow they assumed. I'd taught generations of kids discipline and heart through music. I'd rebuilt my life after Henry's death. I wasn't done yet. I told Linda I'd come to the bank tomorrow, my mind already racing. They thought I wouldn't notice, wouldn't fight, but I was Ruth Bennett, and I was already planning my next move. The spark in my chest was growing, and it wasn't going out. Quick question, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Drop a comment, I read every single one. While you're here, a like and subscribe would mean so much. It tells me you're with me. Let's continue to the story. The morning after my forgotten 74th birthday, I woke with a weight in my chest, the sting of David and Emily's betrayal sharper than the silence of the day before. Forgetting me was one thing, using my name, my credit, my life's work for a $50,000 loan was another. My home filled with the echoes of piano lessons, and Henry's quiet laughter was my sanctuary, built through decades of teaching and saving. They thought they could slip this past me, that I was too old, too trusting to notice. But I'd spent 50 years teaching kids discipline and respect, through music, guiding them note by note to something beautiful. If David and Emily thought they could play me, they were about to hit a wrong chord. I brewed coffee, the familiar ritual grounding me, and sat at my dining table, where David once practiced scales, his small hands fumbling over the keys. The table was worn, its scratches telling stories of family dinners, lessons planned, dreams shared. I wasn't going to let their greed erase that. I called Linda, my bank manager and former student, to get the full picture. Her voice was steady but laced with concern. "Ruth, it's definitely fraud," she said. "They used your social security number and forged your signature on a $50,000 loan application, tied to their condo address. It's for their wedding, venue, catering, a honeymoon in the Bahamas." She paused, then added, "They're counting on your credit and I'm betting they'll push you to sell your house to cover it." My stomach twisted. My house, worth $600,000, was the real prize. I asked Linda to hold off on freezing the account. I wanted to see how far they'd go. She agreed, promising to monitor every move and send me the loan documents. I pulled out my financial records, spreading them across the table like sheet music. Henry and I had been careful, saving every extra dollar from my piano lessons and his mechanic work. After his death, I'd kept it up, living simply, avoiding debt. My nest egg was $850,000, plus the house fully paid off in 2000. David didn't know the details. I'd never shared them, wanting him to build his own life, not rely on mine. Now I saw his betrayal clearly. He and Emily thought I was an easy mark, a widow with a big house, and no fight left. They were wrong. I called Susan, my lawyer, who'd handled Henry's estate with a sharp mind and a kind heart. I told her everything, the forgotten birthday, the loan, Linda's findings. "Ruth, your credit's pristine, and you're sharp as ever," she said, reviewing my health records. "No one can claim you're unfit to manage your affairs. We can report the fraud and protect your asset." I asked her to set up a trust to lock down my house and savings, making them untouchable. "Make it ironclad," I said, my voice firm. Susan promised to have it ready in days, adding, "They picked the wrong woman to mess with." I drove to First Community Trust that afternoon, the spring air warm through my car window. Linda met me in her office, her face a mix of worry and resolve. She showed me the loan documents, my name scrawled in Emily's handwriting, a clumsy forgery that made my blood boil. The loan was approved, payments deferred for 6 months, giving David and Emily time to spend it on their wedding. Linda had dug deeper. They'd made deposits into a wedding fund, booking a country club venue and a luxury caterer. "They're also asking about your home's value," Linda said. A realtor friend mentioned they're talking to buyers, saying you're ready to downsize. Downsize, the word hit like a sour note. My home, where Henry and I had danced to old records, where David learned his first chords, was just a dollar sign to them. An idea sparked as I drove home, the piano in my living room calling to me. What if I turned my home into something more, a community music school, offering free lessons to kids who couldn't afford them? I'd seen music change lives, giving kids confidence, purpose. My house was perfect, big enough for a studio, practice rooms, a small recital space. I could fund it with my savings, keep it going with grants. It would be a legacy, not just for me, but for Henry, for every kid I'd taught. I wasn't ready to let David and Emily steal my life's work. I kept them in the dark, answering their calls with vague responses. "Mom, we're worried about you living alone," David said one evening, his voice too smooth, like he was reading a script. Emily chimed in, suggesting a cozy apartment for my safe. I said I'd think about it, my tone neutral, while Susan worked on the trust and Linda tracked the loan. Every night I sat at my piano, playing Chopin's nocturnes, the music steadying my resolve. I thought of Henry, his hand on mine as we played duets, his belief in my strength. David and Emily thought I was invisible, a footnote to their plans. They'd forgotten who taught them fairness, who'd built this life note by note. I was Ruth Bennett, and I was already composing my comeback. 2 months after my forgotten birthday, I was playing a careful game, letting David and Emily think I was oblivious while I built my defense. Their betrayal, using my name for a $50,000 loan to fund their lavish wedding, had cracked something in me, but it hadn't broken me. Instead, it sharpened my focus, like tuning a piano to hit every note just right. I'd spent decades teaching kids discipline and heart through music, turning their stumbles into songs. I wasn't about to let my own son and his fiancée turn my life into their piggy bank. My home, filled with the echoes of Henry's laughter and the piano we loved, was mine, and I was going to make it untouchable. I started each morning at my dining table, coffee in hand, the same table where David once practiced scales, his small hands fumbling but eager. The scratches on its surface told stories of family, of lessons, of love stories I wasn't ready to let go. Susan, my lawyer, was moving fast on the trust, locking my house and $850,000 in savings, so no one could touch them without my consent. She called one morning with an update. "It's almost done, Ruth. Your assets are safe, and I've added protections for any new ventures tied to the property." That was my ace. A plan to turn my home into a community music school, offering free lessons to kids who couldn't afford them. Susan loved the idea, promising to help with permits and grants. "You're a force," she said, and I felt it, the spark of defiance growing into a steady flame. I reached out to Paul, a contractor and father of a former student, to discuss renovations. We met in my garage, the air smelling of oil and old wood, Henry's tools still neatly lined up. I laid out my vision: a studio in the garage for group lessons, practice rooms in the basement, a small recital space in the living room. Paul nodded, his pencil scratching notes. "It's doable, Ruth. We can repurpose what's here, keep costs down." Henry would have been proud. He estimated $150,000 to start, using existing spaces. I allocated $150,000 from my savings, leaving plenty for later phases. Paul agreed to keep it quiet. I didn't want David or Emily catching on. Linda, my bank manager, was my eyes on their scheme. She called with updates. The $50,000 loan was active, with David and Emily funneling funds into a wedding account. They'd booked a country club venue, a high-end caterer, even a string quartet for their dream wedding. But Linda found more. 2 smaller loans, $5,000 and $10,000, also in my name, used for wedding deposits. "They're counting on your house to cover it all," she said. "They've been talking to a realtor, saying you're too old to manage it." My jaw tightened. My home, worth $600,000, was their end game, a cash grab to fund their extravagance. I told Linda to let the loans process, gathering more evidence of their fraud. I wanted them to think they were winning until I was ready to strike. I pitched Bennett Music Haven to the town council, framing it as a gift to the community: free piano lessons for kids, recitals for families, a space for music to heal. I'd seen music lift kids out of tough times, give them focus. My house was perfect, big enough for studios, close to town for access. The council was thrilled, offering a $30,000 grant to start, with promises of more if it succeeded. I invited trusted friends, retired teachers, local musicians, parents of former students to join. We cleared the garage, set up donated pianos, and planned a curriculum: beginner lessons, advanced theory, even a choir. I named it after Henry and me, a nod to the life we'd built, the music we'd shared. I kept David and Emily in the dark, playing the part of the unaware mother. They'd call, their voices dripping with false concern. "Mom, that big house must be a lot to manage," Emily said one day, her tone too sweet. David suggested I look at condos for my comfort. I murmured vague agreements, saying I was considering options, while Susan finalized the trust and Paul's crew started renovations. Every evening, I played my piano Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, filling the house, steadying my resolve. I thought of Henry, his hand on mine as we played duets, his belief in my strength. David and Emily thought I was a footnote, a means to their ends. They'd forgotten the woman who'd taught them fairness, who'd built this life note by note. I started a notebook, sketching layouts for the music school, where the pianos would go, how the recital space would look, which songs we'd teach first. It wasn't just about saving my home, it was about creating something lasting, something no one could steal. The town buzzed with excitement, volunteers signing up to help. Linda sent me updates on the loans, each one a brick in my case against David and Emily. The trust was nearly complete, the music school taking shape. I was building a legacy, and they were about to learn who they'd underestimated. I was Ruth Bennett, and I was ready to play my next chord. 3 months after my forgotten 74th birthday, Bennett Music Haven was ready to strike its first note. The garage was transformed into a bright studio with 3 donated pianos, their keys gleaming under new lights. The basement held 2 practice rooms, soundproofed for lessons, and the living room was set for recitals, with chairs arranged around my old upright piano. I'd invested $150,000 of my $850,000 savings and secured a $30,000 town grant, with more funding on the horizon. Susan, my lawyer, had finalized the trust, locking my home and remaining $700,000 so tightly no one could touch them. Linda, my bank manager, had tracked the $50,000 loan David and Emily took in my name, plus 2 smaller ones, $5,000 and $10,000, all funneled into their wedding fund. The evidence of their fraud was ironclad, and I was ready to play my final chord. I'd kept David and Emily in the dark, letting them think I was clueless while they spent the loan money on their dream wedding country club venue, gourmet catering, a Bahamas honeymoon. They'd even pushed harder, sending me senior living brochures, Emily's voice syrupy as she suggested I downsize for safety. David stopped by once, eyeing my piano like it was already his, saying I should sell some old stuff to simplify. I smiled, said I'd think about it, and changed the subject. Inside, I was a coiled spring, counting the days until I could expose their scheme. Linda confirmed they'd been meeting with a realtor, claiming I was too frail to manage my $600,000 home, planning to sell it to cover their loans and lifestyle. I invited them for dinner, telling them I wanted to talk about my future. I spent the day cooking Henry's favorite lasagna, the kitchen warm with the smell of garlic and tomato. I set the table with our old china, the plates we'd used for every family milestone, a quiet reminder of what I was fighting for. They arrived at 6, David in a crisp shirt, Emily in a designer dress that screamed wedding budget. They were all smiles, David talking about their venue, Emily gushing about floral arrangements. I poured wine, kept my voice light, and let them chatter, their smugness confirming every suspicion. They thought they'd won, thought I was a pushover who'd hand over my home for their dreams. After dessert, lemon cake, a nod to my uncelebrated birthday, I cleared the plates and slid a folder across the table. I've made a decision about my plans, I said, my voice steady as a metronome, the same tone I'd used to calm nervous students before recitals. David opened the folder, expecting a condo brochure or a sale agreement. Instead, he saw the trust documents, a flyer for Bennett Music Haven with my name as founder, and copies of the fraudulent loan applications, my forged signature glaring in Emily's handwriting. Emily's wineglass froze halfway to her lips. David's face went pale, his hands trembling. "Mum, what's this?" he stammered. I leaned back, folding my arms. "It's my home, my music school, legally protected, and I know about the $50,000 loan, the $15,000 in smaller loans, your wedding fund, all in my name, without my consent." I nodded to the doorway, where Linda stood, unannounced, holding bank records. "We've frozen your accounts," she said, her voice sharp. "The loans are flagged as fraud, and the wedding fund venue, caterer, honeymoon is gone. You're facing charges unless Ruth says otherwise." Emily gasped, her eyes welling up. David's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. "You forgot my birthday but remembered my credit," I said, my tone cold but calm. "You planned to sell my home, my life for your wedding. I raised you better, David." Emily tried to speak, her voice shrill. "Ruth, we were just trying to help. You're alone here," I cut her off. Help yourselves, you mean. I'm not alone, I'm building something you can't touch. David mumbled about misunderstandings, but I pointed to the door. Get out. Until you learn respect, you're not welcome here. They scrambled, Emily's heels clicking, David's head down, the door slamming behind them. I exhaled, my heart steady, despite the ache. I'd raised David, loved him through every missed note, every triumph, but he'd chosen greed over family. I didn't feel triumph, just clarity. The next day I threw myself into the music school. Paul's crew finished the studio, volunteers set up pianos, and the council approved another $20,000 grant. I invited friends, retired teachers, musicians, parents of former students to join. We planned lessons, recitals, a summer camp. Bennett Music Haven wasn't just a school, it was a promise to myself and every kid who'd walk through my door, that music could heal, could build. David and Emily's betrayal had pushed me to create something bigger, and I wasn't done. That night, I sat at my piano, playing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the notes filling the house. I thought of Henry, his hand on mine during our duets, his belief in my strength. Their fraud had hurt, but it had also woken me up. I was Ruth Bennett, teacher, builder, fighter. The music school was my stand, my home, a haven no one could steal, and I was ready for the next melody. A month after I sent David and Emily scrambling from my dining table, Bennett Music Haven opened its doors, filling my home with the sound of music and hope. I stood in the garage-turned-studio, watching kids pluck out their first notes on the pianos, their laughter mixing with the chords. The basement practice rooms hummed with scales, the living room was ready for its first recital, and the porch, where I'd waited in vain on my birthday, now welcomed parents dropping off eager students. I'd invested $150,000 of my $850,000 savings and secured a $30,000 town grant, with another $20,000 approved, making the school self-sustaining. My home, worth $600,000, was locked in a trust, untouchable. David and Emily's betrayal, their $50,000 loan, the smaller frauds, their plan to sell my house, had pushed me to create something bigger, something no one could steal. I wasn't just surviving their greed, I was thriving. The opening day was a celebration, the kind Henry would have loved. We held a small concert in the living room, with a 10-year-old named Mia playing Für Elise on my old upright piano, her fingers hesitant but proud. My friends, retired teachers, local musicians, parents of former students, filled the room clapping warmly. Linda, my bank manager, was there, raising a glass of lemonade. "Ruth, you've turned this house into magic," she said, her smile wide. Susan, my lawyer, hugged me, whispering, "You showed them what you're made of." I smiled, my throat tight, wishing Henry could see it. He'd have been out here tuning the pianos, charming the kids, telling stories about our early days teaching together. Bennett Music Haven was more than a school, it was a community. We offered free lessons to kids who couldn't afford them, funded by grants and donations from families whose children I'd taught decades ago. There was Jamal, 12, who'd never touched a piano but now came every day to practice. There was Ellen, a 70-year-old former choir director, who taught voice lessons, her laughter filling the studio. We held recitals every month, the living room packed with parents and grandparents, the kids beaming as they took their bows. I taught beginner classes 3 times a week, my fingers still nimble on the keys, showing kids how to find joy in every note. The school wasn't just about music, it was about giving kids confidence, purpose, a place to belong, just as I'd done for David all those years ago. David and Emily were gone from my life, at least for now. A week after the confrontation, they sent a letter full of apologies and excuses. David claimed he'd only wanted to help, that the loans were a mistake. Emily said they'd cancelled their wedding, their accounts frozen, their debts piling up. I read the letter, then set it aside, untouched by their words. Respect wasn't a scribbled apology, or a plea for forgiveness, it was a way of living, and they'd chosen greed over it. I heard through Linda that they were struggling, their condo payments late, their wedding fund drained by the bank's fraud recovery. I didn't gloat, it wasn't my way, but I didn't help, either. David was my son, the boy I'd taught to play Twinkle Twinkle, but he'd have to find his own way back if he ever could. My new family was the kids stumbling through scales, the teachers sharing my love of music, the parents clapping at recitals. The town embraced the school, with more kids signing up every week, some for piano, some for choir, some just to be part of something warm. We started a summer camp, teaching music theory and hosting open mic nights. The council promised another $25,000 grant to add a small outdoor stage. My remaining $700,000 in savings was safe. The school breaking even, my home alive with purpose. I'd turned a betrayal into a legacy, proving that age didn't mean surrender. One evening, I sat on the porch under string lights, playing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat on a portable keyboard, the notes floating into the dusk. Kids and parents lingered in the yard, laughing, sharing cookies from the recital. I thought of Henry, his hand on mine during our duets, his voice calling me his songbird, with that gentle smile. David and Emily's betrayal had hurt, their forgotten birthday a wound, their fraud a deeper cut, but it had also woken me up, pushed me to create something lasting. I wasn't just Ruth Bennett, retired piano teacher. I was Ruth Bennett, builder, teacher, unstoppable. The stars twinkled above and I smiled, feeling Henry's presence in the music, the laughter, the life around me. The kids waved goodnight, their voices bright, and I waved back, my heart full. Bennett Music Haven was my answer to betrayal, my proof that I was still here, still playing. David and Emily had tried to take my name, my home, my life, but they'd only made me stronger. My melody was just beginning, and it was one they'd never forget.